My name is Anya Petrova, I am 29 years old, and I work as a senior travel curator. My life, from the outside, looks like a well-plotted itinerary. A charming apartment in a rain-washed corner of Portland, a career built on a passion for weaving together the perfect journeys for others, and a quiet, self-sufficient independence I've cultivated since I was a teenager. But for all the maps I've charted, the one that outlined my own family remained a territory I could never quite navigate. I always believed my role was that of the anchor, the steady, reliable point in the Petrova's often turbulent waters. That one autumn dinner, with the scent of my mother's rosemary chicken filling the air, proved I was not the anchor at all. I was just the port they used when it was convenient. "I found the most incredible glass-blowing workshop for our trip to Venice," I said, passing the bowl of garlic-whipped potatoes to my father. "It's in Murano, run by a family that's been doing it for generations." "I think you'd love it, Dad." My sister, Serafina, let out a delicate, airy laugh. "Oh, Anya, that's sweet. Did you really think you were coming with us?" My father smiled, a gentle, dismissive crinkle around his eyes. "This one is just for the core family, sweetie. A celebration of 40 years. Their words, spoken so casually, didn't shatter the room. They simply sucked the air out of it, leaving a vacuum where my breath was supposed to be. I just nodded, a familiar ache blooming in my chest, and picked up my fork. The storm was gathering inside me, but they were blissfully unaware. They had no idea the journey they were about to take was not the one I had planned. To understand the storm, you have to understand the climate it was born in. I have always been the capable one in the Petrova family. While my siblings drifted through life on currents of parental support, I learned to build my own raft. I worked 3 part-time jobs to put myself through the University of Oregon, emerging with a degree in cultural anthropology and a deep-seated pride in my self-reliance. My graduation was marked not by a party, but by a brief phone call from my parents, who were busy helping my sister move into her 4th apartment in 2 years. My apartment in Portland's Selwood Moreland neighborhood is my sanctuary. It's a second-floor walk-up filled with plants, books on far-flung places, and the warm scent of coffee and old paper. It is modest, but it is wholly mine, a testament to years of careful saving and budgeting. Each month, a portion of my salary from Woven Paths Travel, the boutique agency where I work, goes into my retirement fund and a savings account I've labeled Future Home. My parents find this fiscally responsible habit baffling. "Why throw money away on rent, Anya?" my mother would often ask. "You could just move back home." Serafina did, twice. Serafina, my 33-year-old sister, is the family masterpiece. She is beautiful, charming, and perpetually on the verge of discovering her true calling. This calling has, over the years, included being a yoga instructor, a jewelry designer, and a sommelier, each pursuit funded by our parents. When Serafina decided she needed a new hybrid SUV to better reflect her eco-conscious brand, my father co-signed the loan without hesitation. This was just a year after they had refused to help me with a 4-figure repair bill for my trusty, decade-old Subaru, suggesting I learn to be more resourceful. Then there is my brother, Julian, who at 31, exists in a space of amiable neutrality. He's not overtly cruel like Serafina can be, but he is a master of self-preservation. He works as a project manager for my father's commercial real estate firm, a position he inherited rather than earned. Julian is the one who calls me for advice on his mortgage or his perpetually complicated love life, his voice full of earnest appreciation. But in a room with Serafina and our parents, he becomes a ghost, fading into the background, his silence a form of quiet complicity. This hierarchy was established early. My academic awards and debate team trophies were met with a perfunctory, "That's nice, dear." Serafina's fleeting passions and Julian's C+ averages were celebrated with dinners out and lavish praise. The walls of my parents' sprawling home in the West Hills are a gallery of their achievements, Serafina's amateur paintings, Julian's sports photos. My own successes are conspicuously absent, relegated to a dusty box in the attic of my memory. Despite it all, I kept showing up. I baked my mother's favorite lemon meringue pie for holidays. I remembered every birthday with thoughtful, curated gifts, even when mine was acknowledged with a text message a week late. I listened, I nodded. I played the part of the dutiful daughter, holding onto a sliver of hope that one day, my efforts would make me visible to them. The Venice trip was first mentioned during a summer barbecue, a hazy afternoon of grill smoke and polite neighborhood chatter. Dad announced he was taking the family to Italy for his and Mom's 40th wedding anniversary. My heart soared. Italy. I'd studied its art, its history. I spoke passable Italian. I immediately offered my services. Dad, let me handle the arrangements, I'd said. Through woven paths, I can get us access to experiences you can't book online. Private tours, unique accommodations. It will be my anniversary gift to you. He was delighted. Over the next 2 months, I poured my heart and soul into planning their dream vacation. I spent countless evenings after work researching, calling contacts in Italy, and designing a bespoke 10-day itinerary. We spoke about it constantly. We discussed the merits of a villa in Tuscany versus a canal-side apartment in Venice. I secured reservations at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Florence that had a 6-month waiting list. I used my industry standing to get them upgraded rooms at every hotel. My boss, knowing my dedication, even authorized me to use my full employee discount, a privilege normally reserved for an employee's own travel. Not once in all those conversations, all those shared moments of excitement, did anyone suggest I was merely the travel agent. This wasn't the first time I'd been left on the sidelines. For my 25th birthday, they planned a spontaneous family weekend at the Oregon coast, only to act surprised when I reminded them I had to work. The Christmas I drove 6 hours through a snowstorm to be with them, I arrived to find they'd already opened all the presents on Christmas Eve because everyone was just too excited to wait. But being told to my face, with a condescending smile, that I wasn't part of the core family, that was a new, deeper kind of cut. The dinner that changed everything began, as they always do, with a performance of normalcy. I arrived at 5 o'clock, a bottle of aged Brunello in hand, a wine that cost more than my weekly groceries. It was a splurge, a deliberate gesture of celebration for the anniversary trip I believed we were all sharing. The house, with its perfectly manicured lawn and artfully cluttered interior, felt both familiar and alien. I noticed, as I always did, the framed photos on the mantelpiece, Serafina at her college graduation, the one she didn't complete, Julian with his arm around Dad at a golf tournament. A family portrait from a decade ago where I stood slightly apart from the group, almost out of frame. "Anya, you're here." Mom called from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Serafina and Julian are in the living room." I found them exactly as I expected, Serafina scrolling languidly through her phone on the velvet sofa, Julian engrossed in a sports documentary on the enormous television that had been their joint Christmas gift. "Hey, Anya," Julian murmured, his eyes fixed on the screen. Serafina offered a slight, acknowledging tilt of her head. "Brought some wine for the anniversary," I said, my voice bright as I headed for the kitchen. Dinner started with the usual pleasantries. Dad carved the chicken, Mom served the potatoes, and I poured the expensive wine. The conversation drifted from office politics at Dad's company to Mom's ongoing feud with the Homeowners Association. It was during a lull, as I refilled my mother's water glass, that I brought up the trip. "Actually, work's been great," I said, in response to Mom's token question. "Very busy, but I'm so excited for next month. I've been reading up on the Doge's Palace secret itineraries. I think we should book the one that includes the old prisons and the Bridge of Sighs." A sudden, dense silence fell over the table. Serafina snorted into her wine glass, a sound of pure, unadulterated amusement. "Oh, Anya, that's sweet," she said, her eyes glinting. "Did you really think you were coming with us?" My hand, holding my fork, froze midair. "What?" Dad chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that was meant to be kind, but landed like a stone. "This one is just for the core family, sweetie. A celebration of 40 years. Just the 4 of us. The 4 of them." The number hung in the air, definitive and sharp. "But I planned the whole thing," I stammered, my carefully constructed composure beginning to fray. "We talked about the tours together. And we needed your discount. Obviously, Serafina said, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. That's why you were making the arrangements. It saved Dad a fortune. My mother shifted in her seat, a flicker of discomfort in her eyes, but she said nothing. Julian became intensely fascinated with a stray piece of rosemary on his plate. I see, I said, my voice a whisper. But I didn't see. Not then. Serafina laughed again, a sound that felt like shattered glass. Did you honestly buy a plane ticket? Oh God, that's actually tragic. Dad joined her, shaking his head with a fond, pitying smile. We do appreciate the work you put in, Anya. It's a fantastic itinerary. The room seemed to warp, the voices around me becoming muffled and distant as a hot shame washed over me. Yet, somehow I held on. Years of practice in the art of swallowing disappointment kicked in. Could someone pass the asparagus? I asked, my voice miraculously even. The rest of the meal was a surreal performance. They chattered on about what to pack, the long-haul flight, the Italian phrases they should learn. I ate my food, which now tasted of ash, nodded at the right moments, and felt a part of myself wither and die with every cheerful mention of their trip. When dinner was over, I stood and began to clear the plates. Leave those, honey, Mom said. You've had a long week. It's fine, I replied, my back to them. I needed the motion, the simple task of stacking plates to keep my hands from shaking, to hide the tremor in my chin. In the kitchen, the sound of running water was a shield, masking the ragged breaths I was trying to control. Through the doorway, I could hear their excitement, untainted by my silent agony. I'm definitely buying a new leather handbag in Florence, Serafina was saying. A real one. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and silence. The tears finally came when I was inside my apartment, the door locked securely behind me. I sank to the floor in the entryway, the darkness of the room a welcome cloak, and sobbed. I cried for the girl who had tried so hard to be good enough, for the woman who kept hoping this time would be different. I cried for the sheer, breathtaking cruelty of it all. I slept fitfully, the conversation replaying in a torturous loop. Core family. After 29 years, I was still on the outside looking in. By morning, the landscape of my grief had shifted. The deep, aching hurt was still there, a hollow space in my chest. But something else was growing beside it, something fierce and bright and clear, anger. It was an anger that didn't seek to destroy, but to protect. It was the anger of a boundary finally being drawn. Monday morning dawned gray and drizzly, a perfect mirror of my mood. I called in sick to work, the lie of a migraine tasting less bitter than the truth of a shattered heart. I couldn't face the cheerful chatter of my colleagues, couldn't pretend to be the calm, collected Anya they all knew. As I lay in bed, staring at the water stains on my ceiling that looked like an unfamiliar coastline, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Thanks again for dinner. Dad really enjoyed that wine you brought. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the wound they had inflicted. It was a masterclass in denial, a dismissal so profound it was almost impressive. I didn't reply. Around noon, I finally forced myself up. I showered, letting the hot water sluice away the lingering feeling of humiliation, and made a pot of strong, black coffee. My laptop was still on my small dining table, open to a folder filled with the Venice trip details. Confirmation emails, booking references, tour vouchers. And that's when I saw it, a detail I had overlooked in my initial planning. Everything was in my name. As the travel curator and the one using the agency's credentials, I was listed as the primary contact and booking agent for the entire trip. Every hotel, every tour, every train ticket was linked to my professional account and my personal email. My father had given me his credit card for the major deposits, but the final balances were set to be automatically charged upon check-in or final confirmation, all of which I controlled. The system was designed to give the agent flexibility for last-minute adjustments. I stared at the screen, a new path on my internal map beginning to illuminate. It would be simple. Deceptively simple. For the next hour, I didn't touch the bookings. Instead, I opened a new document and began to write. I cataloged every slight, every exclusion, every time I had been made to feel like an accessory to their lives. The forgotten birthdays, the dismissed achievements, the quiet condescension. It wasn't about building a case against them, it was about building a case for myself. I was validating my own feelings, acknowledging a truth I had spent a lifetime trying to ignore. The Venice trip wasn't an isolated incident, it was a culmination. Core family. The phrase echoed in my mind, no longer a source of pain, but a catalyst. I opened the Woven Paths booking portal. The trip was less than 3 weeks away. The system showed all reservations were confirmed but remained fully editable by me, the agent of record. I could cancel everything, of course. But a mass cancellation would trigger immediate notifications to my father's email and credit card company. It would be a loud, messy explosion. That wasn't my style. My work was about precision, subtlety, and creating a seamless experience. The plan that began to form in my mind was the opposite of seamless. It was a masterpiece of disruption, executed with the quiet, devastating efficiency of a seasoned professional. My first step was to request 2 weeks of unpaid leave from work, citing a family emergency that required me to be offline and unreachable. My boss, a compassionate woman named Diane, approved it without question. The leave was scheduled to begin the day before my family's departure. Next, I went online and searched for cabins in the mountains around Mount Hood. I found a secluded A-frame nestled in a forest of old-growth firs, with a wood-burning stove and, most importantly, no Wi-Fi and notoriously unreliable cell service. I booked it for the entire duration of their planned trip to Italy. I needed silence. I needed to be surrounded by the quiet indifference of nature. I then meticulously crafted a series of auto-reply messages for my work and personal email accounts, and scheduled a few vague, cheerful social media posts. Taking a much-needed digital detox to recharge in nature. See you all in a couple of weeks. It would create the illusion that I was simply on my own well-deserved vacation. The final, most crucial step involved the booking system itself. I didn't cancel anything. I modified. I went into the reservation for their villa in Tuscany and changed the booking dates to start 3 days later than planned. I adjusted their flight details from Portland to Venice, shifting them to a red-eye flight that departed 24 hours after their original one. I altered the name on the hotel reservation in Florence from Petrova Party to Petrova, J, making Julian the primary guest instead of my father. I canceled the prepaid car service from the Venice airport, but left the reservation for the rental car in Florence intact. Each change was small, a single thread pulled from the tapestry I had so carefully woven. But pulled together, they would unravel the entire journey. The system would automatically send out updated confirmations, but I had one more trick up my sleeve. As the booking agent, I had the ability to specify the recipient email for all notifications. I created a new, disposable email address and redirected every single update to that account, which I would never check. My family would be operating off the original itinerary I had printed for them weeks ago, a document that was now a work of pure fiction. A few times, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was this too much? Was I stooping to their level? But then I would remember the look on Serafina's face, the sound of my father's dismissive chuckle, and the profound loneliness of that dinner table. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequence. It was a lesson in the value of the person they had so carelessly discarded. For my entire life, I had absorbed their thoughtlessness. Now, for once, they would be the ones to experience the full impact of their own actions. The night before their scheduled departure, I packed my Subaru. Hiking boots, a stack of books, my journal, and a bottle of good Oregon Pinot Noir. I felt a strange and potent calm settle over me. I wasn't the volatile, emotional girl they always painted me to be. I was a cartographer, and I was simply redrawing the map. The cabin on Mount Hood was even more beautiful than the pictures. It smelled of cedar and wood smoke, and the only sound was the sigh of the wind through the towering Douglas firs. The owner, a grizzled man named Silas, showed me how to work the wood stove, warned me about a family of curious raccoons, and then left me in peace. Landlines there for emergencies, he'd said, pointing to an old rotary phone on the wall. Cell service is a ghost up here. It was perfect. I spent the first 2 days in a state of blissful disconnection. I hiked for hours, my boots crunching on trails carpeted with fallen leaves. I sat by the creek that ran behind the cabin, watching the clear water tumble over moss-covered stones. I was breathing air that felt ancient and clean, washing away the smog of my family's toxicity. I deliberately left my phone off, tucked away in my backpack. On the third morning, knowing they would now be at the airport, I allowed myself to turn it on. I made a cup of tea, sat in a worn armchair by the window, and watched as the digital world flooded in. As expected, the family group chat, Petrova clan, had erupted. 9:52 a.m. Serafina, there's an issue with the check-in. The airline has no record of our flight for today. 9:55 a.m. Mom, what do you mean, no record? Your father is talking to the agent now. This is ridiculous. 10:15 a.m. Julian Dad says the flight is for tomorrow. Not today. What the hell? 10:17 a.m. Serafina, tomorrow. The villa is booked from today. Has anyone tried calling Anya? She did all this. 10:18 a.m. Julian, her phone is going straight to voicemail. I texted. I sipped my tea, a quiet observer of the chaos I had orchestrated. The messages grew more frantic. Their flight was indeed for the following day. Rebooking for the current day would cost them thousands, and there were only 2 seats left. The airline supervisor was unsympathetic. 11:03 a.m. Dad, a new message in the chat. The airline is useless. We are stuck. Serafina is having a meltdown. I'm trying Anya again. My phone rang. It was my father. I watched the screen until the call went to voicemail. His message, when it appeared a moment later, was clipped and furious. Anya, call me immediately. You've made a monumental error with these bookings. We are stranded at the airport. More calls followed. My mother, her voice tight with panic. Julian, sounding genuinely confused. Serafina, leaving a furious, tearful voicemail. I silenced my phone and went for another walk, focusing on the rhythm of my own breathing. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like watching a dramatic film where I already knew the ending. This wasn't about enjoying their suffering, it was about witnessing the natural consequence of their actions. They had treated me as a utility. Now, that utility had been shut off. By evening, when I checked my phone again, the situation had escalated. They had discovered the issue with the Tuscan villa. The booking didn't start for 3 more days. They had been forced to book an overpriced airport hotel for the night. The recriminations had begun. 7:30 p.m. Serafina, this is so typical of Anya. She's probably off on some yoga retreat, completely oblivious to the mess she's made. She's always been so careless. 8:15 p.m. Julian, I don't know, Serafina. Anya is never careless. This feels weird. It was Julian's message that gave me a pang of something other than calm. He was the only one who credited me with confidence, even in this context. But it was Serafina who finally made the connection I knew was inevitable. 9:42 p.m. Serafina, wait a minute. When was that dinner where we told her she wasn't coming? Was it last week? Is it possible she did this on purpose? A flurry of messages followed. My mother, defending me. Serafina, don't be ridiculous. Anya would never do something so malicious. My father, however, was ominously silent. The next day, I knew, would bring the discovery of the changed flight details and the hotel name confusion in Florence. The beautiful, seamless itinerary I had designed would continue to crumble in their hands, piece by piece. The rest of my week in the woods was a quiet revelation. I read 3 books, filled half a journal with my thoughts, and cooked simple, nourishing meals for myself. I felt my own needs, my own desires, coming back into focus. For the first time in a long time, I was the main character in my own story. The final text came from my mother the day before I was due to drive back to Portland. They were home, their Italian vacation having collapsed into a series of expensive, frustrating logistical nightmares. Anya, we are back. I don't know what happened or why, but we need to talk. Your father is very upset. Please come for dinner on Sunday. I didn't reply immediately. I knew I would go. Not because she had asked, but because my journey of self-reclamation wasn't finished. The quiet sabotage was step 1. Step 2 was speaking my truth, out loud, to their faces. I owed that to the girl who had spent a lifetime in silence. I drove into my parents' neighborhood on Sunday afternoon feeling a calm that was utterly foreign to me. In the past, These drives had been filled with a low-grade anxiety, a mental preparation for the subtle gymnastics of navigating my family's expectations. Today, I just felt clear. I had rehearsed nothing. The truth I had learned didn't need a script. All their cars were in the driveway, Dad's imposing black SUV, Mom's practical sedan, and Serafina's pearl-white hybrid. They were a united front, waiting. I walked up the stone path and knocked firmly on the door, forgoing the key I still carried on my ring. It was a small but significant act of separation. Mom opened the door. Her face was a canvas of conflicting emotions, relief, anger, and a deep, weary sadness. Anya. Thank God. Come in. Everyone's waiting in the den. The air in the den was thick with unspoken accusations. Dad was in his leather recliner, his expression a mask of stern neutrality, but a vein pulsed in his temple. Serafina was curled on the sofa, arms crossed, radiating hostility. Julian, sitting apart in an armchair, was the only one who met my gaze. He looked worried. Sit down, Anya, Dad said, his voice a low command. I'd rather stand, thank you, I replied, my voice even. He grunted, accepting the small defiance. Do you have any explanation for the absolute catastrophe you created? The question was so predictable, so perfectly in character, that I almost smiled. He saw only his own inconvenience, his own monetary loss. Actually, I do, I said. But before I offer my explanation, I'd like to hear yours. An explanation for why you thought it was acceptable to use my professional expertise and personal time to plan a vacation you had no intention of including me in, and then to humiliate me about it at the dinner table. Serafina scoffed. Oh, for God's sake. You're really going to pretend this was about your hurt feelings? You sabotaged Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary trip because you're a vindictive child. Serafina, Mom murmured, a weak protest. She turned to me, her eyes pleading. Honey, it wasn't meant to be humiliating. It was just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated, keeping my voice level. So when Dad said the trip was for the core family, that was a misunderstanding. When you all found it amusing that I thought I was invited, that was a misunderstanding. Dad shifted in his recliner. You're being overly dramatic. We made a decision that the trip would be just the four of us. It was an anniversary gift to ourselves. A gift you expected me to procure for you, at a discount, I countered. You could have told me from the beginning. Anya, we'd love your help planning a trip for the four of us. That would have been honest. But you didn't do that. You let me believe I was a part of it. You should have just asked if you were coming instead of assuming, Serafina snapped. I finally turned my full attention to her. Why would I need to ask, Serafina? I was researching restaurants for us. I was booking tours for us. I was designing an itinerary for a shared experience. Who does that for a trip they're not going on? Only someone who has been conditioned to believe their only value is in what they can provide. We appreciated your help, Mom said softly, her voice trembling. We should have been more sensitive. Sensitive. The word broke the dam of my composure, just for a second. Mom, you laughed. All three of you. Do you have any idea what that feels like? Julian spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but clear. She's not wrong. We did laugh. It was a shitty thing to do. Serafina shot him a look of pure betrayal. Are you kidding me, Julian? Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of the truth, he said, looking at me. And we're not going to get anywhere if we pretend what we did was okay. Dad stood up, his face flushed. Enough. Whatever we did or didn't do, Anya, your response was wildly out of proportion. You cost me over $6,000 in rebooking fees and non-refundable deposits. You deliberately and maliciously ruined what was meant to be a special celebration. And what you did wasn't malicious? I shot back. Let me ask you something, Dad. What subject did I write my honors thesis on in college? He stared at me, dumbfounded. What does that have to do with anything? What was it? I don't know. Something about Italy. The socio-economic impact of pilgrimage routes in medieval Spain, I said quietly. I worked on it for a year. I graduated with distinction. You and Mom didn't come to the ceremony because Serafina had a cold. It was the flu. Serafina protested. I ignored her, turning to my mother. Mom, what's the name of my boss at Woven Paths? The one I talk about all the time. She fumbled. Diane? Emily? I'm not good with names, you know that. Julian, I said, my voice softening slightly. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was, without needing help with your finances or your girlfriend? He had the decency to look down. I don't remember. I took a deep breath, feeling the righteous anger coalesce into a solid, unshakable core inside me. This was never about one dinner. It was never about one trip to Venice. This is about a lifetime of being your utility. The responsible daughter, the capable sister, the built-in consultant, the one who is always expected to give, to help, to understand, and to then quietly accept being forgotten. You don't know me. You've never taken the time to know me. You just know what I can do for you. The room was utterly silent. I have spent my entire adult life trying to earn my place at this table, I continued, my voice now low and steady. And that dinner made me realize something. The price of admission isn't worth my self-respect. Serafina stood up, her face twisted in a sneer. So this is your big, heroic moment? You play the victim while acting like a sociopath. You're pathetic, Anya. No, I said, looking at each of them in turn. Pathetic is continuing to beg for crumbs of affection from people who hold the whole loaf. I'm done being pathetic. I'm done being your afterthought. I walked towards the door. If you walk out that door, Anya, Dad warned, his voice hard as iron, don't think things will just go back to normal. I know, I said, my hand on the doorknob. That's the entire point. Actions have consequences. It's the lesson you've been trying to teach me my whole life. I've finally learned it. As I turned to leave, Julian stood up. Anya, wait. I paused. You're right, he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. About all of it. I'm sorry. I never saw it from your side. Serafina let out a sound of disgust. But Julian held my gaze. Can we talk sometime? Just us. A tiny fissure appeared in the wall I had built around my heart. I'd like that, I managed to say. Then I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't need to slam it. The silence I left in my wake was louder than any noise I could have made. As I drove away, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. The first 2 weeks after the confrontation were a study in silence. The Petrova clan group chat remained dormant, a digital monument to our fractured state. I returned to work, immersing myself in the familiar comfort of maps and itineraries. Diane, my boss, was discreetly curious, but respected my privacy, for which I was grateful. I felt a quiet shift within myself, a newfound solidity. The anger had receded, leaving behind the firm, clean lines of a boundary well drawn. The first crack in the silence came from Julian. A simple text message, "Hey, thinking of you. Hope you're okay." I let the message sit for a day before replying. "I'm okay. Thanks for asking." He wrote back instantly. "Coffee? Saturday? My treat." We met at a small, independent coffee shop in a neutral neighborhood, a place with no shared history. Julian looked tired but resolute. He remembered I took my latte with oat milk, a small detail that felt surprisingly significant. "So," he said, after we'd settled into a quiet corner, "things at home are nuclear." "I can imagine." Serafina's telling anyone who will listen that you've had a nervous breakdown. Mom just cries a lot. And Dad is oscillating between furious silence and talking about consulting a lawyer for the money you cost him. The threat of legal action barely registered. Any lawsuit would require a public airing of their behavior. It was an empty threat, and we both knew it. "That's what I told him," Julian said with a wry smile, confirming my thought. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "But Anya, for what it's worth, I haven't been able to stop thinking about what you said. About how you see things. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The way Serafina gets a pass for everything. The way your successes are just expected. The thesis thing. I remember that. I remember you were so proud of it." His validation was a balm on a wound I didn't know was still so tender. We talked for almost 2 hours of a real conversation, perhaps the first of our adult lives. He spoke of the suffocating pressure of working for our father, and I spoke of my dream to one day start my own travel consultancy focused on solo female travelers. As we left, he gave me a hug that felt different from any he'd given before. It felt like one between equals. "Don't write us all off just yet," he said. "Some of us are slow learners." A week later, a tentative text from my mother appeared. "I made your favorite lemon bars. They're on the porch if you want them." It was an offering, devoid of an apology, but steeped in a clumsy, maternal longing. I didn't go get the bars, but I did text her back a simple, "Thank you for thinking of me." It was enough to keep the door from closing completely. The most unexpected communication came via email from my Aunt Irina, my father's estranged sister. "Anya, my dear, your cousin showed me some of Serafina's dramatic social media posts. Without knowing the details, I want to say that I recognize the patterns she's describing, only I suspect she has cast you in the role your father has long played. If you ever need an ear, I'm here. Your grandfather was a difficult man, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." Her email was a lifeline, a voice from within the family confirming I wasn't crazy. I had an ally I never knew existed. As the weeks turned into a month, the question of Thanksgiving loomed. The holiday was a huge affair at my parents' house. The thought of attending filled me with dread. "So, what are you going to do?" my friend Leah asked over dinner one night. "Book a flight to Costa Rica and pretend I never got the invitation?" I joked weakly. Leah, who had been a witness to my family's dynamics for years, shook her head. The old Anya would do that. Or she'd go and suffer in silence. The new Anya. "I think she goes," says her piece, and eats her turkey with her head held high. Her words struck a chord. My power wasn't in absence, it was in presence on my own terms. That evening, I drafted a long email to my parents. I didn't send it. I just wrote it for myself, outlining everything I had said in the den and what I would need to see from them to even consider rebuilding a relationship, acknowledgement, an apology, and a genuine effort to change. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Anya," she began, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Your brother. Julian had a long talk with me and your father. He made us listen." There was a long pause. "I am so sorry. I've been a coward. I saw how things were, but it was easier to keep the peace than to do what was right. I was so proud of your independence that I used it as an excuse not to support you. It was unfair and it was wrong. You are not less important. You are my daughter, and I have failed you." Tears streamed down my face. It was the apology I had waited a lifetime to hear. "Your father," she continued, "he's a proud man. He's not there yet. But he's listening. We both are. If you're willing, we want to try. We want to go to family counseling." "What about Serafina?" I asked, my voice hoarse. A heavy sigh. "Serafina is Serafina. She has her own journey to take. But this is about us. This is about the three of us and Julian, starting over. Will you consider it?" "Yes, Mom," I whispered. "Yes." 6 months later, I stood in my parents' sun-drenched kitchen, helping my mother arrange daffodils in a vase. It was Easter Sunday. The walls of the living room, once a shrine to Serafina and Julian, now held a more balanced collection of photos. There was one of me at my college graduation, which my aunt had sent them, and another of Julian and me, laughing over coffee, taken just a few weeks ago. Our journey had been slow and deliberate, like charting a course through treacherous waters. Family therapy was difficult, punctuated by long silences and tearful revelations. Dad was the hardest to reach, but he kept showing up. The turning point was when he admitted, his voice gruff with emotion, that my independence had always intimidated him because it reminded him of his own strained relationship with his father. Serafina remained a work in progress. She came to therapy twice, declared it pointless, but her hostility had softened into a wary distance. She was here today, a small but significant concession. As we sat down to dinner, I saw that my place card was next to my father's, in the seat of honor. He cleared his throat, tapping his water glass with a spoon. "Before we eat," he said, looking around the table, his eyes lingering on me. "I want to say that this family is recalibrating. And that's a good thing. It's because Anya was brave enough to demand that we be better." He looked directly at me. "We're not planning any big trips for a while. But when we do, it will be all 5 of us. And you, Anya, will be a passenger, not the pilot. Unless you want a pilot." The point is, it will be your choice. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a Hollywood ending. But it was real. Later, while clearing the dessert plates, Serafina cornered me in the kitchen. For the record, she said, avoiding my eyes, Venice would have been way better with you there. You know all the good spots. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. I know. I'm trying, she mumbled. To be less of a well, you know. I know, I said again gently. Me too. The trip they never took had become a strange and unlikely vessel for our family's healing. It had forced us into the deep, turbulent waters of our own history, but in doing so, it had also guided us toward a new shore. The journey had been painful, the cost high, but as I drove home that evening, under a sky streaked with the soft colors of twilight, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had not just redrawn my family's map, I had finally, fully, claimed my own place on it. Have you ever had to take a stand that changed your family dynamic forever? What did you learn about yourself and about them in the process? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more reflections on finding your own path, even when it means leaving the old maps behind. Thank you for listening. Remember, your self-worth is not a destination you have to earn. It is the ground you stand on.